to make another video about a certain doctor that makes a lot of pseudo videos about autism and ADHD, and I want to call out Dr. Mike, because we all know Dr. Mike. He is, first, he's cute, he's very intelligent, very articulate, he has funny content, he speaks about medical topics in a way that it doesn't dumb it down too much, but also is accessible for most audiences. And I don't know, he's a YouTube sweetheart, but I think that there is a huge danger of someone with his platform to invite into his podcast certain individuals that spread pseudoscience. There's another interview we did. I think it is nefarious and dangerous, but at the same time, since it's a very political debate, I don't want to talk about that one. But his podcast with HealthyGammerGG, I think, is a danger to the neurodivergent and also to people with other conditions, because his entire platform spreads a lot of pseudoscience in regard to autoimmune disorders, and particularly as an autistic person, there is a lot of dangerous information that he spreads about autism and ADHD. Now, I know that now I'm starting to make a lot of videos about autism, and the reason I stopped making videos about autism was when I started YouTube around in 2011 was in Japan, 2009, something like that. I had a lot of videos debating vegans, and I also feel so sad because I had so many beautiful things I recorded in Japan, and because the vegan community harassed me because I am someone who struggled with weight my entire life and I had low self-esteem, I ended up deleting most of videos where I talked about my experience in Japan, my debates with vegans. Onision did harass me a lot. He didn't go by Onision, it was his other channel then. So because of Onision, I remember I deleted most of my channel back then. So I don't have a lot of videos anymore where I talk about autism and everything I recorded in Japan. Sadly, it's no longer available because I went through very low self-esteem issues, because the vegan community can be really, really discriminating. So with that said, I also was at this time accused of self-diagnosis, which in part I was self-diagnosing, but also I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was 6 or 7 years old. I lost the diagnosis. I moved countries and the diagnosis didn't carry, so I spent the last not 30 years, because I was in my teens when I started seeking a diagnosis, so about 24, 25 years trying to get a diagnosis. I was just recently re-diagnosed, and considering during the DSM-5 abandoned the Asperger's and regrouped the ASD by levels of support we need. I am currently diagnosed with ADHD and autism level 1, which doesn't mean much because our support needs may change throughout our lives and our situations. But I just wanted to clarify that I am diagnosed, and the reason I am talking is not because I have any personal issues with Dr. K, HealthyGammerGG. It's because everything he says in his channel about autism and ADHD brings up a lot of trauma and reminds me of a lot of the malpractice I suffered under prejudiced and misinformed health institutions, psychiatric institutions that are not prepared to deal with people who are neurodivergent. So I think it's very important, and I hope Dr. Mike takes in consideration that he should research people before he lets them on their podcast, particularly people who spread a lot of misinformation. And I saw the entire videos and interviews. There was pushback from Dr. Mike. He was as courteous as he could be, but I do think that even though he was trying to push back on the pseudoscience in regards to other topics, autism wasn't discussed. I feel that the fact that he platformed Dr. K validates and legitimates his credentials, and I think that Dr. Mike should start reviewing his channel and his claims about autism, about autoimmune disorders. Now, autoimmune disorders aren't my expertise. I have some information because I'm a nerd. I'm a curious, and I like to learn about everything. Genetics and biochemistry fascinate me, and I did study a bit on my own, so I am aware there's a lot of the topics that are mentioned on HealthyGammerGG's channel are crackpot stuff, but my main concern is with autism, because as someone who was diagnosed as a child, psychiatrists who have ableist and stereotypic perception of people who are neurodivergent are the reason so many of us end up dying. And I know I need the trigger warning, but if you search the statistics of people who are neurodivergent, who have ADHD and autism or both, the vast majority of us have shorter lifespans, not just shorter lifespans, significantly shorter lifespans. We are more prone to self-harm, we are more prone to burnout, and the statistics in regards to employment, despite the fact that many of us are highly intelligent, are really bad. And I think that a lot of those statistics could be improved if health professionals and psychiatrists learned more about us and didn't spread pseudoscience. talking about my experience. But a lot of the misinformation that Dr. K spreads about autism are things that I was faced with from health professionals. Autism isn't a mental illness. It's a neurodevelopment disorder. In fact, many don't call it a disorder, call it a condition, because our brains develop differently. And a lot of the approach that Dr. K has about neurodivergence and autoimmune disorders can lead people to die. There is the idea that there's a way to cure us and change us. It's not a disease. We are treated as a disease when an autistic person cannot cease to be autistic. The only way we cease to be autistic is once we are dust. But our bodies, our brains will always be autistic as long as we exist. As long as there's synapses going here, I'm always going to be autistic. I didn't start being autistic all of a sudden, and I won't cease to be autistic all of a sudden. So it is important that these quack doctors get informed about autism, because a lot of their advices is dangerous. Another big concern I have is because of his advice on ADHD, methamphetamines, and medications that are life-saving for people who suffer from ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed as a child with ADHD. I think at the time they didn't consider people who are autistic to have ADHD, but I am currently diagnosed with autism and ADHD and CPTSD. And the fact is that the way you talk about the way we were born spreads a lot of misinformation. Medication in terms of, for people who have ADHD, doesn't cause addiction. And there's the fact is, I was rather surprised when I saw all his videos on ADHD, and there's a lot of misinformation. First and foremost, someone who has ADHD has issues with processing dopamine, and this is why many of us become adrenaline junkies, act recklessly, do dangerous stuff, because we don't become drug addicts when we start taking Adderall or other stimulants. Our brain is a junkie from the moment we are born, because we lack the normal, I think, neuroreceptors. Either there's and I read it somewhere, there are two approaches, and probably there are people who say that we either don't produce enough dopamine, and we have always low dopamine, so this is why we have ADHD. Others say that our neuroreceptors don't process it properly, or maybe there's somewhere in the middle. And There's also issues with melatonin, and autistic people also have similar issues. So when you have autism and ADHD, those issues are going to accumulate. But as I was saying, you don't become a junkie if you have ADHD and start taking Adderall, because it's like if you are insulin resistant, you don't become dependent on insulin because you are getting insulin. The insulin you get is bringing you to a normal state. You don't become addicted to insulin, where your body doesn't cease to produce insulin because you are exposed to insulin. Your body already has issues with insulin, and you need insulin to break down sugars. With dopamine in people who have ADHD, your brain isn't producing or processing dopamine properly, and Adderall and other stimulants will help you with that. So no, if you have ADHD, Adderall and other stimulants aren't going to harm you. They're going to bring you to a normal state. Now, if you tell me people who use these drugs as performance enhancers without any prior condition, then yes, those people may develop issues related to taking drugs that are not prescribed to them and are not made for them. But if you have ADHD, those drugs may save your life. They may save your job. They make you be able to live a relatively normal life. They help you keep a job. And more importantly, they reduce the likelihood that you will do reckless things, because someone who has ADHD is more likely to suffer from addictions, to have reckless behaviors. A lot of us, and I'm talking about me, I was mountain climbing when I was young. I was doing a lot of sports, and I needed that adrenaline to get by. And back then I didn't know I had ADHD. I may have suspected, but considering I was diagnosed with Asperger's, I attributed it to my Asperger's, not necessarily ADHD, because before those ADHD was never diagnosed to someone who is already autistic. So stimulants like Adderall are not making you a junkie, they're not harming you, they're actually avoiding that you develop self-harming behaviors, that you become an adrenaline junkie, so you will not start bungee jumping or parachuting. It's going to regulate your needs, so you will become more productive. Essentially, it will help you reach what is considered normal in today's society. So if you're underperforming because of your ADHD, it will help you focus and be able to keep a normal life just like people who don't have ADHD. It's essentially going to bring you to a regulated state that helps you live your daily life, and it saves lives. It avoids a lot of issues that cause you to self-harm, to endanger yourself, or to live a substandard life because you can't keep a job, you can't perform in school, not because you're dumb, but just because you can't focus on things, and you can't have energy to do basic tasks. Your executive functioning is very low. And it's not therapy that is going to do that. He spreads a lot of misinformation about therapy, about behavioral changes. Kind of reminds me of in the last century, we were forcing people to stop being gay with conversion therapy. And I think that a lot of the misinformation that Dr. K spreads about autism and ADHD is akin to conversion therapy. It's almost, I swear, it's this short of supporting shock therapy to cure autism or ADHD. In regards to autism, there's a lot of prejudiced language, stereotypes that I have seen my entire life, and a lot of the approach he has to feeling his autism primer. I cried several times, and I relieved my trauma with medical institutions because a lot of the nonsense he says about autism in his autism primer is a lot of the malpractice I endured throughout my life. I mean, treating it like a disease, a mental illness, talking about tantrums, talking about AVA therapy. Again, we don't need conversion therapy. We don't need to stop stimming. A lot of the issues that we face as adults and the burnout we have is because from the moment we are a child, we are taught, we learn to mask, or are forced and taught to mask. We are invalidated. There is no cure for autism. The only cure for autism is death, because up until we die, we are always autistic. And even after we die, we are still autistic, we're just dead. There is no way to change an autistic person. The only thing you're going to accomplish is PTSD, like the great majority of us develops. So this is my message, and I'll probably, when I get my computer back, because they took everything I owned, I will dissect the misinformation that Dr. K did, and there's another Harvard quack job spreading misinformation about autism, and saying that we need to heal autism, we need to heal our mitochondria, and whatever misinformation. I swear, I don't know how these people are getting PhDs, but in this case, I'm asking Dr. Mike, stop platforming quack jobs that endanger autistic life, and actually, please go through his ADHD content and his autism content. There's so much misinformation, so much outdated stereotypes, and so much ableism in his content. You really need to go through that. It's really absurd, the sheer amount of misinformation that Dr. K is spreading. I also recommend to see what he says about autoimmune conditions, because it isn't less harmful, and I think a lot of the information that he gives may lead people to stop medication that saves lives and delays the progress of degenerative conditions. So I really think that Dr. Mike needs to revisit his association with HealthyGammerGG, and that's it for this video. I'm sorry I'm a bit all over the place. I probably didn't address all the issues with his content, because again, Dr. K has an absurd number of videos on ADHD and a few on autism that really need to be dissected. But in this case, my message is to Dr. Mike: don't platform quacks. Because even though, and I recognize you were trying to gently let him know that a lot of what he is defending is pseudoscience, the fact that you platformed him on your channel may give him some unwarranted credibility. So I think you should check his content, address the content, probably invite a few autistic people to discuss it, and people who specialize in autism, because psychiatrists are not necessarily gifted in regards to autism. I mean, I'm 37 years old. I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was a child. And my entire life, I went through abusive psychiatric institutions, social services that said I wasn't autistic. I suffered a lot of insults from said psychiatrists. They tried to diagnose me with all sorts of mental illnesses that I don't have. There was a lot of prejudice, because if you are a high-functioning autistic, whatever that means, because high functioning is relative, at some moments of our lives we maybe need more help and assistance, and there is a lot of ableism. I wasn't considered autistic because I am too intelligent, too articulate, because I learned to talk too early for someone who is autistic. But at the same time, they treated me like a 5-year-old, and how incompetent I was. And every criticism that I had from psychiatrists were essentially autistic traits. But none of them was prepared to diagnose me with autism, and they rejected a referral to someone who specializes in autism disorders. So if you're going to platform someone, please make sure that those people do not have problematic content that can harm communities and people who have conditions and disorders that will be harmed by pseudoscience. And the information he's putting about is really bad and endangers us, because autism isn't a mental illness. Autism cannot be cured. Conversion therapy, I think it's the best way to describe it, is only going to make us miserable and destroy our lives. So I think that it is important that doctors and people who have good credentials stop platforming people like Dr. K, And I don't know how Dr. K is a psychiatrist, but again, my entire life I was exposed to psychiatrists who didn't understand autism, had really bad prejudices against autism. So it's not surprising. What is surprising is that to this day, people like Dr. K are being platformed, spreading dangerous misinformation, not only about autism ADHD, but also about autoimmune disorders and things that cannot be cured and need appropriate medication to survive and have a minimum quality of life. And if we stop those medications, people with ADHD will likely have lower life expectancy. And just look at me, I'm 37 years old. I have autism and ADHD. Social services took everything I owned twice. I was hospitalized against my will. I haven't had a relationship in my entire life. I live alone with my cat. I was only allowed to get a job because I ran away. And even when I wasn't being harassed by social services, I had a hard time getting a job because I'm autistic and I have ADHD. I am highly intelligent. I know a lot of things. I speak multiple languages, and nonetheless, I have issues finishing projects. I had issues getting jobs, and things that probably wouldn't happen if I had a diagnosis and if I hadn't gone through so many psychiatrists that had bad practice in relation to neurodivergent problems, disorders, not conditions, because it's not that we're defective, it's the fact that this world is prepared for people who are neurotypical, and communication between neurotypical people and autistic people doesn't work. But the burden of effort is always put on the autistic person. It's not fair, but it is how it is. We are the minority population, so we need to adapt, but at the same time, just the very fact that people who are supposed to understand us don't understand us, and we don't get the support and help we need, it leads to death. It leads to poor quality of life. The statistics on autism are very, very dire. We have lower life expectancy. Our employment rates are the lowest of any group. So it is important that quack doctors like Dr. K are exposed, and the information on autism and ADHD reassessed and humanized, because there are so many negative stereotypes. Therapies that instead of helping us only traumatize us. So I think it is very important that the medical profession starts addressing us in a different way. We are not defective, we are different, and I think it is really important that people who have some notions of psychology and psychiatry and medicine start treating us differently. And Dr. Mike, please go through all the pseudoscience that HealthyGammerGG posts, because they're not just hurting the autistic community. They are not just hurting people who have ADHD. They're also spreading misinformation that can hurt people who have addiction, who have autoimmune disorders. So please, Dr. Mike, stop platforming quack doctors. Thank you for listening to this video, and I'm sorry I'm all over the place. I've been in a bad situation, so I'm not very good at talking right now, but I wanted to make this video. So thank you and bye. And sorry, Dr. Mike, I talked to you, but I think with such a huge platform, the autistic community could use you as an ally to debunk misinformation, and please contact people who specialize in autism to give us a voice and debunk the quackery that is on YouTube about autism and ADHD. And I think that things that are more your specialty, like autoimmune conditions, could also be addressed, because that doctor that you platform has a lot of opinions, and a lot of opinions that are wrong. So I think it's important that you talk about it. And bye. Sorry for this video, and thank you for listening.